Here we go again. Here's our next lesson. We are writing linear equations given 2 points. So the last lesson, I gave you a slope and I gave you a point. And then we found my linear equation and y equals mx plus b. But this time, all I'm going to do is give you 2 points. Even if you were in class right now, I would give you 2 points and I would see if you're able to write a linear equation. But since you're not in front of me, I can't get that instant feedback. So I'm going to show you how to do it. This is a 2-step process. The first process is if you know you have 2 points, what are you able to find given 2 points? You are able to find your slope. So that's the first step. We've got to find our slope given 2 points. And remember, your slope formula is y, is not y, it's not y. It is m equals change in y over change in x. Okay, so that's your slope formula. And you can do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. As long as it's consistent, it's going to be the same. And that's why a lot of times you see the formula as change in y over change in x, because, you know, you can do it either way. Or you can make the table of values like we've done and notice your change in y over change in x and then figure your slope out there. So that's the first part. We've got to be able to find the slope. The second part is now we can use the formula. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Or if you prefer using the shortcut, after you find your slope, then you can use y equals mx plus b to find your beginning point, and then voila, you have your linear equation. So this lesson, it's not difficult, it's just another step that we're using. So I'm going to go over a few examples with you, but you should be able to get it pretty easily. All right, so let's expand that. And so number 1, remember this is a 2-step process. My first step is to find the slope. My second step is to find the beginning point or use my formula y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, so first step, let's find the slope. So -3 and 7, 1 and -1. So my change in y to get from 7 to -1 is -8. To get from -3 to +1, I'm going to add 4. So my slope is change in -8 divided by 4, which is -2. So now I have my slope. Now, if I use my formula, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, it does not matter which point I use. It doesn't matter. Because slope is a constant rate of change, it's going to give me the same answer either time. So I'm going to choose whichever point I want. And I'm going to choose this point just because it's 1 and -1. So now I'm going to plug in these values. Y minus a -1 is a +1 equals my slope is -2. X minus 1 is my x value here. And so now I distribute and I get -2x plus 2. Subtract 1 on both sides and I get y equals -2x plus 1. And that gives me my linear equation. So in this number 1, it's a 2-step process, right? 1, we find our slope. If you have trouble finding your slope, go back to the first video and then refresh your memory on how to find slope. So I went through that pretty fast because you should already know how to do that. And then the second step was the last video. So we're just plugging into 2 sections together. All right, I'm going to do number 2. And now I'll use the shortcut way for here. So I still need to find my slope. I can't get around that. So I'm still going to find my slope, -6, -7, 3, -4. How do you get from -7 to -4? You add 3. And how do you get from -6 to 3? You're going to add 9. And I think I brought this up in the last video, but you always think of the number line. Like if this were -7, how would you get to -4? You add 3, right? And then if you're wondering how I'm getting that +9, well, if you're at -7 here, or -6, here's 0 and here's 3, how do you get from -6 to 3? You jump 6 spaces plus you jump 3 spaces, and that gives me that +9. So that's just kind of a refresher on how I'm getting that change value. So now slope, remember it's change in y over change in x. If you tell me it's 9 divided by 3, that's wrong because that's change in x over change in y. Slope is a ratio. It's specific to change in y over change in x. So m equals 3 over 9, which reduces to 1/3. So now I have my slope as 1/3, and does it matter which point I use? It does not matter which point. So let's just use that first point and see what happens. So now, here's my formula, y equals mx plus b. My y value is -7, my slope is 1/3, my x value is -6, and I need to find b. So I get -7 equals -2 plus b. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides, and I get b equals -5. I'm not done. All I've done is solve for my y-intercept, or my beginning point. Now I got to bring the two together. So I get y equals slope is 1/3 x minus 5 is my beginning point. So y equals 1/3 x minus 5. And there is my linear equation. Okay. All right, let's do a couple more. Let's flip it over. I mean, you can try as hard as you want to make them tough, but it's all done the same way. So let's look at 13 and 14. Again, I'll use the point slope formula for 13, and I'll use the shortcut for number 14. So here, I got to find my slope. I can't get around it. So 3, -5, 2, -1. How do I get from -5 to -1? I add 4. How do I get from 3 to 2? I subtract 1. So my slope is change in y over change in x. So it's 4 over -1, which reduces the same to -4. So my slope is -4. Now I use my formula, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, and I plug in some values. Again, it doesn't matter what point. I'm going to use this one just because it's lower numbers, and in my head that makes it easy, but I don't know. So here I have 1 minus a -1. 1 minus a negative becomes +1 equals my slope is -4, x minus my x value is 2. So now I get y plus 1 equals, distribute that -4, and when I subtract 1 on both sides, I get y equals -4x plus 7. So there is my linear equation given 2 points. One, I found my slope, then I found my, used my formula. Okay, number 14, I have 2 points. I cannot get around the fact that I have to find my slope. So -3 and 14, 2 and -1. To get from 14 to -1, I'm going to subtract 15. To get from -3 to 2, I'm going to add 5. And my slope is -15 over 5, which can be reduced to -3. So here I found my slope. Now I'm going to use y equals mx plus b, and it doesn't matter which point I use. I'm just going to use this one because it's lower numbers. So I get -1 equals -3 times 2 plus b. And when I solve for b, I get -1 equals -6 plus b, add 6 to both sides, and I get b equals 5. So now I have my slope, now I have my beginning point, and now I can put into the equation y equals mx plus b, where m is -3, and my beginning point is +5, and voila, I have my answer. Okay? So if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck on your homework.